Welcome to this week's Ruck'n Maul. Sam Bruce alongside Greg Growden. Greg, we'll kick it off this week with the Reds and the Blues, Richard Graham and Sir John Kirwan. What's going on?
Well, both have had dreadful seasons and the media starting to hovering, saying it's time for both of them to go. And that's going to be the interesting situation. Will they last the season or not? First up with Richard Graham. You've got to admit, the Red season this year has been deplorable. It was ordinary last year where there were so many discussions about lack of spirit, rifts within the camp, and this year you just watch them. They are a mess. They lost all their spirit. You just see when they turn the camera to the bench, and it's like people on Skid Row there. There's just nothing going on. Now the Queensland Rugby Union repeatedly say Richard Graham's got the backing of them. Fine, and I saw that Rod McCall, the chairman, said this week we should wait until all the players have come back and see what goes on. That may be too late. But the other give up is Queensland Rugby Union also saying, I think we better have a look into the HPU, the High Performance Unit, and see if that's going okay. That's a give up. That's the first clue that there's something going on. In the meantime, names are starting to bob up as possible replacements. Brian Smith's name has again appeared. His name's also been linked to the Waratahs job because they were also looking for a coach because Michael Checker's not going to be doing it next year. So he's in demand. Pat Howard of Cricket Australia's name was bobbed up, both are going for both jobs. The situation there is that he's on a big wicket at the Cricket Australia, and I'd find it surprising if he went there to become a coach, but still they're hovering. And another name, a surprise name from left field with the Reds, was Ewen McKenzie's name.
Seriously?
Yes, this was brought up by someone who's very close to the Queensland Rugby and said, look, we should think about it, but if that happens, could you imagine the fear and loathing Australian Rugby Union
in trouble
corridors? Yeah, so that is left field. I'm not saying that it's going to happen, but his name has bobbed up. Now on to the Auckland, same thing. So John Kirwan, they're in a similar situation, terrible record. He's only about 30% success rate since he's been there. And again, the media in Auckland is really starting to rip in. But the interesting thing about this situation is John Kirwan's been really aggressive, saying, I'm the man for the job, da-di-da-di-da-di-da. So, but again, who knows? I really can't see them both lasting. They're just, both teams are just so out of kilter.
They are indeed. Just one more quick one on the Reds. Their tactics before the game against the Waratahs last week, bizarre.
It was strange. After all the build-up that O'Connor was going to be at 10, they run on and Nick Frisbee's at number 10. And apparently it was all mind games all week that they trained that way. And there was all these reshuffles. You had guys on the bench who were there and whatever. And big decision to play Nick Frisbee, a halfback at number 10, against the Waratahs. It's not the time to play mind games. And I know there's doubts over whether James O'Connor should have played there, but in the end you had two players who were a complete waste of time. You had Frisbee simply froze. And you got to understand that's fair enough as well. And you can see the further the game went, the further away he went from the gain line. And by the end of the game, Will Genny almost had to throw a gridiron pass to get it to him, whereas O'Connor he was basically wasted, not sided. So. You can basically say that Richard Graham has created a lot of the problems himself. Those tactics, which is regarded by so many people in Queensland as the most important game, Queensland New South Wales, was a complete failure, and that does not help him keep hold of his job.
Some other news on the coaching front. Perhaps Laurie Fisher, the former Brumbies Director of Coaching and a one-time coach as well, could link up with the Wallabies for the World Cup, with Michael Foley perhaps sliding down as revealed by our fellow correspondent last week, Brett McKay.
That's right, yeah, Michael Foley, Michael Checker has been pushing for him quite a while. That seemed to have cooled right off. Okay. And in the interim, I heard late last week that Laurie Fisher's name has bobbed up as a possible candidate there. Again, whether it will happen, I don't know, because the situation is there that Laurie Fisher is in a good position over in Gloucester, and whether he can do the job, I'm uncertain. But he's worth pursuing, because Laurie Fisher is highly regarded by the players. He's a good tactician, and it would be an interesting team. The coaching team, we had Checker, Larkham and Fisher, so you'd have basically the Waratahs and Brumbies coaching panels the last year or two working together. And with the team most likely to be based around those two provinces, I think it would help harmony. Yep. So it is worth pursuing. Whether it will happen, I don't know. Again, say with Pat Howard, the money situation could work against them.
And the Sevens World Series announced this week, coming to Sydney from the Gold Coast. A smart move. The crowds up there have been disastrous, and it looks like it'll be a really fantastic event at Allianz Stadium.
Yeah, exactly. It should have happened years ago. The Gold Coast Sevens was a flop. It was worth a try because you could think there, but the crowds have been poor for a long while, lack of interest. Like Sevens football, Sydney's perfect for it. Perfect stadium there, and it will go well. But the big situation is still, at that function where they were announcing the Sydney Sevens were there, you heard that there's still doubts over whether the big names will be eligible or want to play in the Olympic Games next year with the Australian Sevens team, and that's going to be a problem straight away. But there's an even another problem, which we were talking about before we came on air. Will the Australian team actually qualify?
That's the thing. That's the big one, isn't it? Sitting in fourth spot at the moment. They'll have to hold on to that all the way through. You've got to think South Africa, New Zealand are going to be automatic qualifiers, and Fiji as well, which leaves Australia in a fight with Samoa, England, Canada, USA on the way up. So there's still a hell of a lot more to play out before we get to the Olympics, isn't there?
Exactly. You really need the big names for these earlier games to get them through, because if they don't make it, it is an ultimate embarrassment for the Australian Rugby Union, because for the last couple of years, Bill Paul, the AU chief, has gone on and on and on about how Sevens is the saving grace of Australian rugby. If they can't qualify, no, his campaign is a complete flop, and it will just there'll be so many red faces of the Australian rugby. So you're right. It's encouraging to say that we could have big names at the Olympic Games, but the point is, as we've talked about, they may not get there.
Yes, of course. So the top 4 spots automatic qualifiers from this season, and then if Australia fail to make that, they've been to a regional qualifier in Oceania. So a lot of water to go under the bridge between now and then. Greg, that's another big week in rugby.
Yeah, an interesting week. The coaching situation, keep an eye on it. Results this week will be crucial.
Tune in next week.